This is The Roadmap with Ted Jenkins.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Roadmap. I'm your host, Ted Jenkins. You've seen exclusively here at this show on America's Small Business Network. You can always go to asbn.com if you want to see all the episodes that we've done with our fabulous entrepreneurs. Every week on The Roadmap, I try to bring you some of the brightest and best CEOs and entrepreneurs, ones that are starting businesses, scaling businesses, and maybe one day exit stage left for that big prize down the road. I love talking to entrepreneurs across the country. I'm so excited to have one on this week, a friend of mine and a really cool business, Jack Karavich. He's the CEO and founder of Tigeraire, which is just like, I just think this is the coolest business because I'm going to start off and tell everybody when, or just ask, when in the world or why in the world did you decide to come up with an air-conditioned football helmet?
Yeah.
Yes, I said that, folks. Air-conditioned football helmet.
Yeah, you know, it was really just I think a construct of the fact that I tinker a lot and I build a lot. Happened to go in and sit with some folks at LSU during the COVID pandemic, and they were preparing for the football season and struggling with additional face protections that they were going to have on the face mask of the football helmet, and it was causing a lot of breathing issues. So really, the early intent was working with the university, building prototypes, and volunteering to just help them create more air movement in the football helmets for the players so that they could breathe easily should they need to use the additional face protections during that 2020 season. And then what we found very early on with players like Damone Clark and Jamar Chase and others in the summer before the season started was that they were using it just because it felt good. And we're not wearing any of the face protection at the time. And that was kind of an aha moment, you know, with folks that I worked with there, Greg Stringfellow and Jack Marucci, you know, and I think we had this moment a few weeks in where Jack Marucci kind of turned to us and was like, gosh, this feels like a product idea. You know, everyone wants to just wear it and they're calling it, you know, football helmet air conditioning. So it took a life of its own after that. And I think that's where we started to realize that this was actually a very common problem in a lot of different areas, especially in segments where people are wearing protective headwear. So that's kind of extended now the business model, and
this is where the name Tigeraire came from, though.
It did
because it started at LSU. You were thinking about air conditioning and the LSU Tigers, and is that how it came about?
Yeah, I mean it was a very quick, you know, oh my gosh, we should incorporate. Let's get a company logo. People always comment on the logo. In fact, with the new Sunday Red Tiger Woods project, where I feel like they maybe are tipping their hats to us. I'm sure they're not, but very similar logo. We bought ours for $32 on Fiverr, so big Fiverr fan. But it was actually inspiration from Gatorade. So similar story.
Really?
And we thought, what? We started at a SEC school, and we'll do a kind of a similar, you know, play on words with Tigeraire.
So did you have to patent this?
We did. We actually we filed the original patents in partnership with LSU, and since then have worked on a variety of new IP projects that we filed, and you know, the protections from filing are great. Working with LSU is great, but you know, we've dedicated ourselves to really annually refreshing the technology and creating new iterations of what we've built and improving it constantly.
It's expensive to get a patent, isn't it? For those that have never done it before,
it is.
I mean, it's not like it costs $5,000 to get a patent.
No, and I mean the broader, you know, the broader the net that or the wider net that you cast. So if you go for an international patent versus domestic, the cost definitely goes up. And partnering with LSU was definitely very helpful for us out of the gate in order to protect that IP and create some
did the patent
buzz
domestically, and you also did it internationally?
We did.
What's the international side of it look like? There's all those countries that are out there. It's not different in every country?
Yeah, there are blocks in certain areas, Europe and parts of Asia and the Middle East and South America, Latin America, that you can sort of file at once. But it is a very expensive decision as you start to go internationally, because each country has similarly large expenses associated with it. So you could very, very quickly see yourself, you know, spending high six figures if you're not careful.
So talk to us about the technical part of this, because when you say the word air conditioning, I think about the first unit I had outside my apartment, which was this big bulky box. I think about what I see in my attic, which are these gigantic machines.
Right.
How does it work where it makes the air cool?
Yeah, so it really, for us, we had a longer way of describing the product when we started, and what we found was that football players kept calling it helmet air conditioning. The reality is it's just a very, very fast accelerator of air that we've created that's used in a lot of newer technology, 3D printers, and it's taking the air, it's dissipating the heat within the cavity, and it's blowing that recycled, that cooler air onto the skin. And really, it's just accelerating the body's natural cooling process. So the way we cool is sweating, and that evaporative process of the sweat leaving our skin, and that sensation is what cools the body, cools the skin, and creates the health benefit of cooling the body down. So being able to sweat faster and expedite that cycle, especially in more humid environments, actually is beneficial, because when you're in a more humid environment, you're not as efficient at sweating, so you actually start to overheat more quickly. Or whereas if you're in there and you're blowing the air across that sweat, the water and the vapors is leaving the skin more quickly, and you feel that benefit of a cooler body. If you're sitting in a room with a fan, we often talk with people about this, and you turn a fan on, there's a very common sentiment that, oh, well, the temperature in the room has dropped. And actually, the ambient temperature doesn't change when you turn a fan on. It's actually the sensation of your body having that evaporative cooling benefit accelerating while a fan is blowing across your skin that makes it feel cooler in the room.
Who know? We had Bill Nye, science guy, out with us today. That's what Jack Karavich is as well. When you're building these products, obviously it had to cost not a lot of time, but a lot of money.
Yep.
And you're not selling football helmets yet. Like, how do you fund the business to get this kind of business up and going?
Yeah, so a lot of learning there. What we did is we had a early round, pre-seed round of investment money, angel, you could call it angel, friends and family, or pre-seed round. Fundraising in order to get just an initial prototype in market that we could test more widely. That allowed us to go into more mass manufacturing disciplines where we're building a more robust and stable product line versus where we started, which was all 3D printing and building it ourselves in-house in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So what we've done and what we've learned is that a successful startup typically is de-risking itself through funding rounds. So what we're looking at is being able to prove some sort of value that we're able to achieve within each of these funding rounds, these incremental funding rounds that we raise, and then being able to say, okay, well, we've proven that. Now let's take, again, a larger step forward and be able to do more now with the technology and the roadmap that we have in mind. But they're incremental increases in what our scope and vision is that we want to achieve with each funding round.
Because you're essentially trying to convince someone without having lots of sales, or in some cases no sales, that the value of the business should be here.
100%.
How does that dialogue go on? Is it really what the market says it's worth? Is that what it ends up being, or are you able to point to other businesses to say, look, these businesses were valued at this level and they didn't have any revenue or not a lot of revenue anyway?
I think it's a combination of both, because I think both of those stories are very true. So we've seen everything from early hyper-valuation startup acquisitions like Jet.com, which I experienced at Walmart, where it was a smaller e-commerce company. They exited and were acquired by Walmart for around $3 billion early in their journey. So you see that that value being applied by people and by businesses and by investors based on what they see the market potential being. So one of the things that we learned early on is that football, although it's a great segment, it's about a 5 million person market that you would be going after. And then as we started to look again more broadly at the different similar analogous issues that were being experienced in the, across different sports, baseball, softball, lacrosse, ice hockey even, across then, even larger industrial segment, hard hats, safety helmets, it expanded that market potential. And really with that, investors are able to extrapolate, well, if the market is that big and you could potentially take a % of that market over time, here's what it could be worth as a business with annual recurring revenue.
So you've got the football helmet, and now you've created an air-conditioned hard hat, if you will?
Correct.
How does that work?
So the early iteration that we had of the product was actually an add-on that you would pop inside of your hard hat. And for us, that was really about validating, I think, the need and the want in industry. Yeah. So, you go out there and you hear really crazy stories to start off with a lot of the time in, all of these early product conversations, football or industrial. And what we found was that we had people telling us, how innovative and how desperate they would be in order to find cooling solutions within that
Sure,
industrial
especially with
space.
hitting record temperatures. We saw this summer,
Absolutely.
120, 130 degrees in places like Phoenix.
Yeah, and you'll hear stories that are almost hard to believe. I mean, one example, and we've heard it multiple times, would be that folks would be going to work on a job site in the morning. They'd actually take a Dixie cup, cut it in half, fill it with ice and a little water, roll duct tape, put it on the bottom, and stick it inside of their hard hat. And it just seems so far-fetched. And I would ask someone, well, what would you do if it spills? And they're like, well, it feels great then. So I mean, it's that level of looking for anything, I think, to help cool the body, cool the head, where you're experiencing so much discomfort. And then also when you're working, OSHA, especially on the industrial side, but
Right.
we see it on the athletic side very clearly as well. You have a lot of byproducts from that overheating around the head and face, specifically around the sweat that then formulates and then drips down your forehead into your eyes. It obstructs your vision, impacts your ability to perform at sports, and actually is a very, very significant cause of injury in the industrial space when you think about your vision being obstructed from sweat and whatnot. So these are all very serious challenges, and they they're areas where we're looking to to innovate and create solutions. So that's what actually brought us to our latest product line, which is
I
the
saw
Zephyr.
this. I saw this here. I mean, I just think this is quite amazing because I see people at the ballpark, and I know there's a lot of uses for this that have those fans or they're shooting around their head. But this device that you see here, basically, it clips onto your hat, right? Or a hat,
clothing,
and
purse.
then the air condition, if you will, blows out of these vents, right? And then there's an LED light here on the front as well. So you just basically clip it on the top of your hat.
Yeah.
And that's it. And how long will it air condition in one charge?
So we get about 10 to 11 hours of runtime off the Pro Edition, which has the headlamp integrated into it. And then if you have the LED on high, we get about 5 hours, 5.5 hours of runtime. With
So will a
LED
place
on.
like Cabela's or Bass Pro Shops want to buy something? I look at this camouflage for all hunters or people that go fishing or stuff like that. They're out and it's dark and they could use the light, or even when it's not, they're out there and it's hot, they're sitting in a blind.
Yeah, we've already entered the actually several retail locations of smaller hunting and fishing apparel and outfitting stores across the Gulf
How do you
Coast.
get a deal with a place like Cabela's? Like, what's the a lot of people that are watching this have never tried to go to a big box place like a Target or again like a Cabela's and say, hey, let's make a deal. Do they order maybe a certain quantity to see if there's uptake? Like, how do they make that decision?
Yeah, so we're early in that process, and now I would share, I guess, what I've learned so far, which is when you go in, there's typically larger deals that exist for distribution and product purchasing within these bigger retailers like Dick's or Cabela's. So you try to go in and piggyback off of one of those relationships, and then have someone that's going to provide the product to a Dick's or to a Cabela's using a company that can produce and ship and distribute it reliably to them. And it will start with a smaller purchase, to your point. They'll put it in a few key demographic markets and see how it tests and see how it performs. We're at that stage right now in the conversations with a variety of retailers. We brought on a retail strategist internally at the company who's helped us understand a lot of that process. Really amazing guy and a former LSU baseball player. And then he's brought in his contacts in industry that do, I don't want to name the companies we're working with, but they'll do everything from dealing directly with our manufacturer to ordering in advance to ensure that they have product on hand that they can move quickly out across that distribution network. Because again, scale and distribution is going to be something that a large retailer is looking that you have the ability to support. So you end up paying a percentage to a variety of stakeholders that are involved that actually onboard smaller, newer products and push them through their existing network that they've developed with these retailers.
I often hear with products sort of this 100-100 model, and I'll tell you what I mean by that is that, like, if you're making a product like this, you need to think about 100% markup to go to wholesale. And then the idea is that the people that wholesale, let's say it's a retail store, a big box, they'll make it 100% markup as well.
That's almost spot on. That's funny. I've never heard that before.
100-100 model.
But that is almost exactly the way the financials work out. Yep.
Interesting. So where do you make these today?
So now we have a partner that I met through graduate school, and we've known each other for a while now and have worked on a few just crazier project ideas in the past. But he owns a manufacturing firm in Shenzhen, China, and we manufacture all of the electronics and the components in Shenzhen. And it's been an incredible experience. I mean, The reality
is just because it's that much cheaper to manufacture it there?
No, it's just because it's not possible to manufacture here in the U.S., frankly.
Really?
At least not in a way where you could proudly say made in the USA yet, right? So I mean,
Wow.
all of the component parts, all of the electronics, all of the microchips, everything, all of those are still manufactured outside of the U.S. So really the best that you can hope for is assembled in the U.S. And even then, it's difficult to find a reliable manufacturer from our experience thus far because they just simply don't do the volume that you do in China.
You
Now,
gotta do this at scale.
yeah, they can't really do it at scale yet, and I think we see a lot of that changing. So we have a very strong fascination with the manufacturing technology that's working in our favor right now with these partners, but it's changing very rapidly with robotics and automation, where they're essentially removing so much of their value add over the years, where you think manufacturing moved to these areas in the world where it was very inexpensive labor, and essentially the hands that are being used to do the work were very inexpensive. Well, that's changed. It's gotten more expensive, and now the technology is becoming more hands-off. So a single operator can work a machine, multiple machines that are manufacturing parts.
Sure.
And with that, I think the economies of scale of being in Southeast Asia are changing. In fact, I think the World Economic Forum had a really interesting piece a year or two ago that they said around 350 million jobs are going to be lost in the next 12 years, all in Southeast Asia. And I think a lot of that has to do with the shift that we're going to experience in manufacturing, moving back into domestic hubs, because you just simply don't need to buy it from those countries. Now, they might be building the manufacturing tech that we use.
Are you affected by tariff tax out there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's...
So like if the U.S. gets into a situation with China and tariff tax that, obviously goes up, that affects the business.
100%. 100%. In fact, I don't think there's a single thing in this room that's been purchased that's not affected by that.
Really?
Probably not.
Anything that's electronic probably in some way was made in China
Yes.
and made its way here. So, now that the business is built, you're in a Series A round. Can you walk people through what that looks like? Because some people hear that, they don't know what it is.
Sure. And there's probably people that'll be listening, watching that are far more experienced than I am with this. But for us, that really is our first equity round, where we'll be issuing equity to our investors. We'll be taking our convertible notes, converting those into actual equity in the company. The term Series A, as I've learned, and again, hopefully not misspeaking here, refers to the class of stock that we issue, our first preferred class of stock, which would be preferred Series A. And that's really what each of the series, you'll hear an investment sequence
Series B,
refer
Series
to.
C,
Correct.
you see that,
and it really just means preferred stock, Series B, preferred stock, and so on, Series C. So that Series A for us, there's certain... I would say hallmarks of like what it is to be in a Series A and what the expectation is once you've reached it and what you should be going after you've raised that money. A lot of it ties around market fit, and then also pre-Series A leading up to it, showing market fit, and then post-Series A, I think a strong expectation to dial in customer acquisition cost. So a lot of the time you could be going in and really be upside down on how much it costs for you to get a customer, but you're showing, hey, people want this. It's helping people. And a lot of the time investors will just say, okay, well, we're not concerned with the CAC, the customer acquisition cost. We love that there's market fit, right? But after you raise that Series A, you got to start, squeezing those margins.
You got to be profitable.
You got to find a way to start being profitable. Now, I think that there's been a lot of variability over the last 20 years in the tech space as far as what the expectations are for profitability. I think obviously notoriously we've had many companies IPO in our lifetime now that are not profitable. Our parents had never experienced that. Our grandparents had never experienced that. But now I think we're starting to see a swing back to some more traditional financial economics as far as what companies investors and companies are expecting and the markets are expecting, because sound financials are not something we want to just turn our back on. I think there are fringe cases where maybe the scalability is something that it's worth holding off on profitability, but that is a very rare circumstance. And in fact, I think it's something that we want to find more.
And how do you know as you build this, whether you take product like this direct to consumer, try to sell it all on the internet, or you try to do big box, or do you really believe it's a combination of both?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different theories on it, which has really led us to believe with some of the folks I've spoken with that you kind of try all of them.
Yeah.
You try to see what is a good fit, where you're going to get traction. But as a startup, you have limited means. So you need to kind of put more eggs in certain baskets in order to find whether or not that traction is real. But for us, it's also looking at analogous businesses that are in industry. So if we're looking at a business and how they're set up and selling to customers that we would like to sell to in a similar model, say, the hard hat manufacturers, how do they sell to these industrial companies? So looking at that combination of maybe a B2B and a retail model and a variety of different ways of blending them, maybe not having an online channel because it's not as advantageous. So we're looking at a lot of those different strategies that have been implemented by existing companies and figuring out which ones we want to mirror.
And
how
you
we
said
mirror.
now that you may add, or you are trying to add a software component to this, and what does that look like?
So we're working actually right now on our data platform that is, everything that we're working on is centered around heat mitigation. So for us, I think the fascination that we have is around improving how heat management is done on a job site, live on a job site. So what we see is that there is a very broad brushstroke that's applied to heat management on these U.S. job sites, domestic and international.
Right.
Typically, it's just looking at the ambient temperature and saying, okay, it is this temperature or hotter today. Here's the number of breaks we'll be taking depending on the temperature, and you run with that. And the problem with it is that OSHA has also defined, and international standards groups that are in the safety space have defined more, I would say, more ornate, more elegant equations and calculations that you can use in order to personalize break time for individuals. But unless you have a PhD in mathematics or a supercomputer on your job site, you're just saying, okay, well, it's 92 degrees. All right, this is going to be the break time. We're going to be, and the expectations for hydration and so on, and you go with it. So a foreman or safety director is going to try to keep it simple and just stick with a much easier implementation of those safety rules. So if you think now, well, instead of taking those large averages of safety rules, how do we personalize it to those staff members so that maybe instead of someone taking a 30-minute break every hour when it's warmer, which if you think about it, you're now working 2 people in an hour to do the job of 1 person when you're into a 30-minute break paradigm. So, if you zoom out, in 2022 alone, there was over $220 billion lost due to heat and productivity in the United States alone, in the industrial sector alone. So that is all due to all these heat productivity challenges. So if you can go into that and say, okay, well, instead of a 30-minute break, we have a better sense of a person's environment around them as they're working. They might be more in the shade. They might be undercover and not getting the direct sunshine that someone else is getting. And we can have them working 33 minutes and then taking a 27-minute break.
Sure.
And we're able to apply these OSHA and international safety standard calculations in a way that real time, you're getting that feedback and able to tune that for each individual. Well, that's a 10% improvement, which might not seem like much.
But it's massive. It's
with
massive,
a $220 billion problem, that's massive. And frankly, what we see is something that's closer to 30 to 50% improvements in how we're managing people on those job sites and allowing them to be more productive and more efficient in their jobs, but also allowing the businesses to more accurately manage on a personal level each of those workers. And then eventually load balancing those staff members across a job site where you're able to move pieces around and say, okay, I'm going to move person A over here where person B is, and I'm shifting these around in order to optimize for work time and also to optimize for safety and heat stress. So technology allows us to do things that we just simply can't do with the human mind and with pen and paper on the fly. So we're really excited about what we're producing there.
Feels like that's how the movie Moneyball got put together, right? They use technology to figure out how to get a bunch of no names to get to the playoffs.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you know when the right time to sell this company is?
Oh gosh, it's not something we really think about day to day. It's not something I think about day to day. I think there are so many different exit ramps that a company can be faced with. That
right.
I guess my summation of it is, when the timing is right, we'll have internal conversations, I think, with key stakeholders, with board members, and we'll make a determination at that time. But what we think we can achieve right now, we've only just begun. I think we have caught a wave as it was forming, which rarely happens in life. And this field of climate adaptation, has a lot. It's a fairly new term from my experience, and I think a lot of it stems from there's been a strong push historically around climate change. How do we address warming temperatures? I mean, we can all agree from data. Every business will agree from data. It's getting warmer. simply because it's costing them more money, right? So we'll acknowledge that. And I think rather than going into the whole climate change, conversation and, the politics on both sides of that conversation, what we're looking at is climate adaptation, saying, okay, there's an acknowledgement it's getting warmer. How do we help people? How do we ensure that people are able to be more equally productive and comfortable and safe in those temperatures? And that's really where our focus is. So I think that we're gonna see a groundswell of companies coming out that are gonna be focused on that problem, because that problem is not going away and it's only getting worse. And rather than maybe trying to fix this larger climate change conversation where maybe there is no fix to that, what we need to be looking at and what we need to address, which is a multi hundreds of trillions of dollar problem, is how do we live and work within that environment? Yeah.
I love this. This is such a great story. Thank you, Jack, for coming on the program today. Folks, this is where you have an idea. Sometimes it comes in your basement, sometimes in your bedroom or at the office. Write those ideas down. Maybe one day you can come up with a brilliant idea like this: air-conditioned football helmets, air-conditioned hard hats, air-conditioned personal devices, and now a software system to really analyze heat management and climate adaptation. It's unbelievable. Thank you so much for tuning into This Week with me, Ted Jenkins, right here on the Roadmap, exclusively here on America's Small Business Network. As always, go to asbn.com to check out all of our great episodes. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Ted Jenkins.